Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Be Your Own Bartender tonight as we kick off the fantastic Labor Day weekend, celebrating all of you and all of us working so hard as we have been. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Emma Swain. I'm the CEO at St. Supéry Estate Vineyards and Winery here in the beautiful Napa Valley, and we're really excited that you're joining us to kick off your holiday weekend. So great to see you all. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to make sure that we can see you, that you've clicked on the bottom of your screen and clicked on participants so you can see who's participating, because that gives you the ability to see a little blue hand. And if you want to raise your hand and ask questions, we will ask you to unmute and call on you. So please keep yourself muted unless you raise your hand and we call on you. Also, click on the chat box at the bottom of the screen and you'll see the chat going on at the side. We'll also post questions from those people who are joining us on Instagram Live and Facebook Live so that we see those questions popping up. And feel free to ask questions as we go along. I try to get to all of them as we go through the event. And we've got Brooke Shank, our winemaker, with us, and Todd Kawachi, our amazing chef. So they're going to teach you a lot about winemaking and making a fantastic meal that you're going to really enjoy this weekend. So you may have questions because they both have a lot of wonderful tips. And for those of you, I know we got a lot of folks on the East Coast tonight and from Texas and all over the country. So thank you for joining us. Just a little bit about St. Supéry. If you haven't had the pleasure of seeing us here in the Napa Valley, we hope you come and join us when you can travel and visit. We are open to the public by appointment. We're about an hour and a half north from San Francisco, right in the beautiful Napa Valley. We're located in the heart of Napa Valley, our Rutherford estate where the winery is. And then our Dollarhide Ranch is in the northeastern corner of Napa Valley, and that's a little over 1,535 acres. It's an amazing property. It's like a valley within Napa Valley. It's a high elevation property. Only about a third of it is developed to vineyard. Just an amazing, amazing place where we grow the majority of our wines. Just really gorgeous with 7 lakes, and just really that high elevation enables us to have a great diurnal shift in temperature. We reach the same peak daytime temperatures there as we do in Rutherford, but we do get cooler nights, which give our Sauvignon Blanc a great freshness. And I hope you have all poured yourself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc and are enjoying it. So I love this property. I love the Rutherford Estate property, and we get different wines from each location. Many of you who've been to Napa Valley know that it's really a very small place. It's only about 30 miles long and 5 miles wide at its widest point, which is in Rutherford. But we also are only about the 1/8 of the size of Bordeaux, but we have a tremendous reputation around the world for quality wines, and we hope you have the opportunity to drink lots of Napa Valley wines because they really are super special. One of the other great things about being in Napa Valley is we are part of the Mediterranean climate zone. That's only 2% of the Earth's surface and very unique, but what it does give us is very dry summers. So typically it doesn't rain after May and until early November, late October. And that dry summer really keeps us from having any pressure from mildew or pesticides, and really gives us that beautiful growing conditions that we like, with the cool nights as the fog comes in and those beautiful warm sunny days. So let's jump over to talk about this wine that we have here in our glass. You know, in Napa Valley, we've only got 6% of the grapes grown in Napa Valley are Sauvignon Blanc, and St. Supéry grows about 8% of those grapes. And we grow them at our Dollarhide Ranch. And over the last 20+ years, we've been propagating our own field selection of Clone 1, which makes up the majority of this wine. This field selection is from our oldest parcel of Sauvignon Blanc on the property. Really a fantastic clone, fantastic varietal, and that selection that we've been working on for over 20 years gives this unique wine, this single vineyard wine, the characteristics that it has, and it ensures that it's consistent year after year, which is what's so important to us being an estate winery, is that consistency year after year. And we started our Sauvignon Blanc harvest just a couple weeks ago. We finished up picking grapes today, and so we thought it would be a lot of fun to have Brooke Shank, our winemaker, tell you a little bit about how we make this wine and show you some live action from the cellar. So Brooke, why don't you tell us what's been going on with this Sauvignon Blanc, because it is delicious.
Yeah, sure. So we have 40 different blocks of Sauvignon Blanc at Dollarhide. And each of those blocks are harvested at a different time. They all come into the cellar, and we keep them separate in the cellar. And kind of what we're doing, so we started harvest on August 17th. We took some video of us dumping the first fruit. That's always so exciting for us to dump that first fruit. We hand harvested the first fruit, and at night it's very important for us to pick fruit at night because we want it to be cold. And as Emma explained, Dollarhide is very cold at night, so that's great for Sauvignon Blanc. That preserves the freshness and the purity of the fruit. You can see this is us dumping the first. I think that's the second bin of Sauvignon Blanc, but that's a very exciting time for us. It's the first time that we smell Sauvignon Blanc and juice, and it's really that is harvest, the first day of harvest. So there we go. You can see those whole clusters get dumped into the hopper there, and then they will drop down and be destemmed, and then all the skins and pulp will go into the press, and we'll basically, the press is a dejuicer, so we'll get all the juice out, and we'll actually go to stainless steel tanks like the one behind me. And we'll chill that juice down really cold. And I don't know if you can see, but there's ice on these tanks right now. We're using glycol to chill the tanks down. And actually it's quite cold in the cellar right now. And the reason why I'm doing that is because we need to settle out that juice so that it's clean. So because what we're going to do is we're going to settle it off of its pulp. And you can see right here, this is the pulp. So this is a sample of the bottom of the juice tank behind me. Very thick lees, juice lees, kind of like orange juice pulp.
Oh, yeah.
So we're basically settling that down and getting it as most compact as possible. I took a sample of the top of the tank. You can see how clear that juice is.
Wow.
And so that's what we're looking for. We want to get as clear as possible, and we will rack that cold, clear juice off. We'll warm it up and encourage fermentation, and then we'll put it through a slow fermentation in these stainless steel tanks. We use stainless steel for this wine because we're trying to show the purity. You can see this is a video of tank fermenting. You can't really, it doesn't look very exciting from outside the tank, but from inside the tank, you can see the bubbles, and it's actually mixing itself, those ferments. It's actually creating so much energy and so much CO2 and heat. It's actually mixing. So these tanks are rolling, and it's really active up top, which also releases amazing aromas. But we will keep that fermentation going pretty slowly. So we'll use temperature to do that, and we'll just, we want it to move every day in sugar, but just not move too quickly because we're trying to preserve those beautiful aromatics in our Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc. And again, keep the crisp purity of that fruit from Dollarhide. And then once it starts fermenting, as you can see there, this is a sample from a fermenting tank, and it's a little bit cloudy, and that's from the yeast in there. This is actually the first tank that we brought in that you just saw dumped, and we use this machine here. This is called a density meter, and it will check the sugar level. So I'm just gonna check it right now, see where we're at.
And we picked these grapes, what, about 23, 24 bricks? Oh, and
yep. I think this came in at 23 bricks on August 17th. So we're at 7 now.
7 now. Yeah.
You can see that. Yep. So we've been moving down nicely, nice and slow, but the aromatics on it is interesting because we get that grapefruit. The grapefruit, I'm almost getting like a grapefruit zest on it, but it's also a fermenting juice too. So it's actually quite cool. And the whole cellar smells like that right now, which is amazing.
You know, I love the smell of the cellar this time of year. It's got like a little banana and just that fresh citrus aroma throughout the whole cellar. It's really fabulous, and it's just an exciting time to be at the winery. So this wine is a blend of all of those lots that you make from the 2018 vintage, and it is just absolutely fresh and delicious. Do you want to describe the wine for us a little bit?
Yeah. So with those 40 blocks, they all are located in different spots around that 1,500 acre property. The majority of them are on flat land, but it's still an elevated vineyard, and we are getting those cold nights, so it has nice acidity, and the flavor profile that we're going for is definitely grapefruit. There's a lot of pink grapefruit. Sometimes it can be yellow grapefruit, but we get some green lime in there, and sometimes on this one you get like a little fennel on the nose, which can be cool for pairing food. But this Sauvignon Blanc, we do, once the fermentation is done, we will rack it off of its yeast lees, which is also kind of a thick dead yeast cells at the bottom. But again, we'll rack it off and we'll get it into bottles straight after harvest to just capture that vibrance. And so every year this wine is coming from the same blocks because we're a state, so it's very consistent year to year to year. The only difference is the weather of that vintage.
Yeah, you know, that is really amazing. I think when we think about wineries in Napa Valley, we think, well, they of course grow their own grapes, they make their own wine, they bottle them. And of the over 550 members of the Napa Valley Vintners Association, there's actually only about 12 of us that are 100% estate grown, produced, and bottled, meaning that we grow that wine in the same appellation. We make it at the winery in that same appellation, and not a drop of anything else goes into it. So when you look at the back label of this wine, apart from seeing that we're green and certified Napa green, you also see that we're grown, produced, and bottled by St. Supéry. And that is the absolute highest level of control to say estate bottled, grown, produced, and bottled on the back label that you can have when making a wine in Napa Valley. Nothing else is as tightly controlled by the government as those words on the back label. Now, sometimes people might say estate in their name, but the key is to look at that back label and see grown, produced, and bottled, because that is the highest level of control versus something that's produced and bottled or simply just bottled by. Every time you lose a word or you become more general, you have less control over that fruit and where everything came from. To us, that's super important because we want to continue to improve quality every year, and we know these blocks. We know how they perform in every vintage. Michael and Brooke have both been with us for a very long time, and they know how the each parcel is performing. And they're just fantastic. And so let's see what Chef Todd Kawachi has to pair with this delicious wine, because I know he's been pulling some things out of the garden at the winery and also bringing some beautiful sustainable seafood. So Chef, what you got going for us?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the St. Supéry kitchen. As Emma was saying, there are a lot of great ingredients that are coming out of our seasonal garden that we have. So really wanted to showcase those. Everything that I do is I try to make it as estate to table as possible for our wine and food pairing. Anything that I want to do is all about showcasing the wine, and the wine happens to be our beautiful Sauvignon Blanc that you just saw how it's all made and everything. And we are so sustainable, being Napa green, that it makes sense for myself in the kitchen to also be as green and sustainable as I can be. And whether that means composting our own ingredients or watching the water usage or our electrical use and things like that, it also reaches out to the products that I source. And so seafood is a fantastic pairing that always goes really well with our Sauvignon Blanc and all of our white wines, even some of our reds, especially depending on the preparation. But I'm all about finding some wonderful sustainable sources. Luckily, Costco also offers some sustainable seafood. They're very conscientious about that sourcing of where they get everything from to be able to sell to you. So I thought I would pick out a couple items today, not only the shrimp that you find, the wild pink Gulf shrimp that are available from Costco. You might find that in your particular region. I know it varies from areas in the country and store to store, but it's a great product that you can have that you can use to showcase, and it's an automatic pairing with our wines. So between the seasonal ingredients that I have here, sustainable seafood or local beef or fantastic beef, I can use that for the red wines as well. The recipes that we included or thought we would come up with for this, hopefully you had that in your invitation to this virtual tasting that you have. If not, you can also find a lot of our recipes on the website if you go to supéry.com and just kind of browse around and check all that out. We've got virtual tastings going on that have to do with the harvest right now or the upcoming holiday entertaining season coming up as well. We've even done some on sustainable seafood. And so there's a lot of sources there where you can find the recipes. But if you're following along or if you want to make this afterwards, by all means, take a look at the recipes and use them as a great guideline. Let me go ahead and show you some of the things that I have going on here in the kitchen. First of all, I'm starting with the garden. I know that ahead of time I wanted to showcase those sustainable shrimp from Costco. So I decided to pick out certain things that I thought would go really well with our wine. Since it's so crisp, it's unoaked, it's nice and fresh, the wine itself. I thought I would showcase some of our beautiful tomatoes that we have coming out of the garden. So many different types. Our estate gardener, Bree Hoover, does a fantastic job of sourcing some really interesting varietals and heirloom types. I've got wonderful cucumbers here that I'm going to work with. There's our striped Armenian. Also right here, this is called the lemon cucumber. So whatever you have from your local markets, your farmers markets, whatever comes from your produce box that you get at your home, whatever it is that's nice and vibrant and fresh, any capitalization on the summer vegetables, that's the main idea here. I also have some wonderful herbs. I'm lucky because I've got so many different types of basil. Here's some beautiful purple basil. I've got Thai basil, all this tiny little micro basil. It's really fantastic with tomatoes. A local cheese that we have is called fromage blanc, and that is what I also decided to put onto the recipe because it's a kind of a creamy but a light type of fresh cheese. So this is made from cow's milk, and it's a fantastic product to have. What I thought I would do is show you how basically I like to treat the shrimp, whether I'm using sustainable shrimp from Kawachi or I'm using a product that I know I can get from Costco. I'm using some shrimp that are going to be nice and tender and sweet. And so here I went ahead and cooked off some shrimp ahead of time. But what I have is basically a pot of water that's on to boil. I have some of our white wine. In this case, you can use the Sauvignon Blanc. I put some lemon in there as well. And it's up to you if you wanted to put more seasoning, more of a crab boil kind of thing with spices and herbs and all that. But I thought I would keep mine really simple just for the demonstration purposes here. So what I did ahead of time was I removed the heads off of the shrimp. I actually cut into the shells so that I could devein them, but I'm going to cook them or basically soft poach them in the shell to kind of hold their shape, add with the flavor, and it's a much better way of cooking them. What I like to do is bring the water up to a boil. As you can see, there's salt in here, some of our white wine, and some lemon. I'm going to go ahead and shut it off now. And with that residual temperature, I'm just going to drop my shrimp in and let them kind of soft poach from that point. So there's plenty of flavor going on in this poaching liquid. I'm just going to let them sit and poach. They will definitely turn color, but they won't necessarily tighten up. A lot of times when you have boiled shrimp or shrimp boil, it's really aggressive. It's really hard to the point where the shrimp get a little tough and can get a little rubbery. So in this way, by using that residual temperature, I can just allow them to cook very softly. And all I'm going to do is check in the thickest section here or along the back line where I split it and wait until it kind of gets away from that raw kind of a color and turns a little bit more opaque and white. And from there, I can just remove them, take them out. I'll cool them down. I like to cool them down just naturally or put them in the refrigerator as opposed to putting them to ice water. That's going to actually wash away a lot of that wonderful flavor that we have here. So I can peel them afterwards, all right? So that's the step on getting the shrimp already. And that's the point of these shrimp that I have right here that are already peeled. They're chilled down nice and cold so they can go onto the cold salad. As far as mixing the ingredients for the tomato and cucumber salad, here's a variety of different tomatoes that I have already. You can see all the different shapes and sizes and colors. I've picked some of the micro basil to go in with that as well. These beautiful cucumbers I decided to slice up, and you can slice them all different shapes or sizes, thickness and textures on here. Here's some of the lemon cucumbers I was mentioning, nice and crunchy. Most of these, the skins are thin enough, these particular types, that I didn't need to peel them. So you have the benefit of the color and that fiber and that texture, and that's really nice. So between these two, plus a few other tomatoes, I wanted to show you, if I could, just a little bit of a kitchen shortcut, or like a little hack. And this has to do with cutting the tomatoes, especially if you're going to do a large quantity of tomatoes. I thought I would show you really quickly how, just by utilizing a couple of kitchen plates, and if they happen to have the rim on the back, the little pedestal that you see here, that's great, because that's what you're looking for. I'm going to cut off the back of the plate, and I'm going to use another one to put over the top. You might have seen this. It's floating around on the internet, so it's easy to find all these little shortcuts and things. If you're browsing around during the shelter in place and you're finding interesting cooking hacks and things like that, you'll notice that I washed and I removed the tops off of these tomatoes, and they're all basically about the same height and same thickness. But if I were to do a large quantity for a group of friends coming over, a big party, as opposed to a small salad for just myself or another, this is a way of doing multiple quantities at once by being able to slice them through. So what I'm going to do is put this other plate on top. So I'm cutting through the bottoms of both of the plates. And this is like a placeholder. And then I'm going to use a sharp knife. In this case, I'm using a serrated because I know it'll go through these tender skins fairly easily. And without putting too much pressure on here, I'm just going to use the top plate as a holder. And I'll go sideways through and cut them a bit, basically right through the middle with my serrated knife. And then just like that, as opposed to doing one by one exactly, I've got a whole bunch of tomatoes here all in one batch. So if you haven't seen that before, that's something to keep in mind. You could always use that. Now you've got all these wonderful tomatoes that are already cut in one fell swoop. Kind of a fun kitchen. Delicious.
Yes. Beautiful tomatoes.
And it works, as I say, it works in a great way as far as for quantity if you're trying to do this for a big group or a larger salad. Now with this, I'm going to go ahead and add in my cucumbers. Now this salad will be great if you can allow it to sit for just a little bit after we've dressed it. And the dressing parts are essentially very simple and clean. We have some lemon, we have some olive oil, we have some lemon zest. I really want these flavors to be natural and as clean as possible. And so cucumber will be maybe about half the amount. And the tomatoes will be the remaining part. You always need to season these up. By the way, my tomatoes are always at room temperature. I think that they taste better and they smell better when they're at room temperature. When you refrigerate them, it kind of mutes some of their aromatics and everything. So I always leave them out at room temp to ripen especially. A decent amount of salt here because there is a lot of water in both the cucumber and in the tomatoes. And so if you don't season it well enough, it's going to taste really watered out. Some black pepper on there is great. Also have some lemon. So that's the additional acid on there, even though the tomatoes have acid. But I'm also going to grate some zest over. So by using a microplane, some kind of a small grater, you can put some aromatic zest on there, which is a characteristic that I always appreciate in the Sauvignon Blanc. And I'll squeeze some of the lemon juice over, just to heighten all the flavors, especially the cucumber. It goes really well with that. And then what I'm going to do is add some olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. And this one happens to be garlic infused because part of the recipe actually calls for some breadcrumbs. And so what I did was I took some rustic breadcrumbs, day-old bread, 2-day-old bread. I basically put it into a food processor and I ground it kind of rustic, rough looking. And so I'm going to use this as almost like a little crunchy texture to go with it. But what I did was I put some olive oil in a pan with the garlic clove. I warmed it up to about low heat, and then I added the raw breadcrumbs in and toasted them until they came to this color, at which point I drained off the oil and saved it and reserved it so that I could use it for other purposes. And then I have my crunchy fried breadcrumbs, garlic infused, garlic flavor, so a little bit of garlic in here as well.
You know, Todd, the other night I had someone who was gluten-free, and so I didn't do the breadcrumbs, but I did some toasted pine nuts because I really find that that texture is an important add that you do on here. Having that little bit of crunch is super nice with this salad.
Right. So you got the moisture, you've got all these juices that are going to kind of meld. The salt will draw out some of these natural juices that you see here, so that's a great idea. You can let this set for maybe upwards 5 minutes or so. That way it kind of has a chance to meld and draw some of those natural juices out. But you've got salt in there, you've got acid, you've got fantastic colors, crunchy textures. That's all going to go fantastic with the wine.
And it's so pretty.
And beautiful, of course. So this is about as clean and natural as I can keep it. What I have here with the farmer's cheese, or the fromage blanc, I actually put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil in there, and I kind of whipped it so it was a little lighter and creamy and smooth. And this is going to be like a little canvas. I'll put a touch over the salad itself, so it's almost like having maybe a slight twist on a caprese salad. But what I want to do is put that into my serving bowl. And so if I take some of this cheese, it's very light. I'll put just a touch in the bowl. Do a fun little pattern or design, a little smear or swirl.
Sounds pretty.
This way you have some here that you can use to add additional to each bite that you have if you'd like. You know, I have a decent amount of basil in here, but I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more. And so if you don't have this tiny basil like these, you can definitely take a larger basil and just chop it up and put it into it. If you wanted to put some parsley or some chives, that's delicious in there as well. All of those fresh, sweeter type of herbs really go well with our Sauvignon Blanc. So I'd highly recommend those. And so that basil is really going to pop. The fragrance on this is incredible. All those small little bits of basil is fantastic. So there's our cucumbers, our tomatoes. We've got all different shapes and varieties. I'm very fortunate and spoiled because we have this right here on our property. Now this alone is delicious with the Sauvignon Blanc, but you can imagine this with the shrimp, the poached shrimp on there as well. It's almost like having a light version of a shrimp salad along with the crunch. There's our beautiful salad with all that. I can put my shrimp on. And then the final garnishes to go with this that tie in so well. I'm actually going to put just a little bit of lemon juice right over the shrimp to kind of brighten them up. Now here's some of those wonderful breadcrumbs. So just put a little crunchy texture on there, little bites. They've got that richness of the olive oil. Another fun ingredient that I have that I just kind of play with is with all of these tomatoes, I actually took some and put them into a dehydrator. So what you see here are some shriveled, dried, different types of the toy box tomatoes. And then once they were dry, I actually pulverized them in a coffee spice grinder, So what I have is some tomato powder here. It's kind of tart. It's got a nice zip to it, beautiful color. I thought I would put that on just for fun. You can put that on there. It's very decorative, but it also adds a little bit of extra zip. It's almost like an additional seasoning there with more of the tomato. And then on top of that, to finish off, I've got some cucumber blossoms. These came right out of the garden, right next to the cucumbers that we picked. They're totally edible as well as beautiful. They're seasonal type of things. So I want to really capitalize on what our terroir and the seasonality of it all, what it all looks like right now. So these are all edible flowers and they're totally optional. You don't have to add them in, but I really love the way that they look. They add a lot of color and vibrancy to the dish. And then finally, if you wanted to, besides having the fromage blanc on the bottom of the bowl, you could also add just a little bit more right over the top. So there's a few more little dollops of the cheese.
Todd, we have a question from Robert asking, do you think creme fraiche as a substitute for the cheese is a good substitute, or other suggestions?
Right, so creme fraiche could work as well because it's almost like that really rich cultured French style of sour cream. It is a little bit more creamy. This is maybe a bit more fresh, almost like more like a ricotta. Creme fraiche has maybe a little bit more tang and sour to it, but it can still work. It's very rich and creamy. Don't hesitate to use it. What you might want to do maybe is just back off a little bit on the amount of lemon juice that you put on there, because then between the tomatoes and the tartness that you might find in the creme fraiche, it may be a little bit acidic, but it all basically needs to go eventually with your Sauvignon Blanc. So this should be a fantastic pairing right here, not only with the wonderful seafood, but with all the beautiful crunchy textures and the seasonal capitalization of cucumbers out of the garden with basil and tomatoes.
That looks just fantastic. And you know, I appreciate you making the comment about Costco and their sustainable seafood. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, you should check out their sustainable seafood section on their website. As a large retailer, they are doing more than their part to help growers and farmers of sustainable seafood really move up to a level where they're good enough to become a Costco vendor. And just they're doing a lot for our environment, and we can restore our oceans to their former glory in the next 30 years, but it takes conscientious vendors like that to really pay attention. So it's great to know where your seafood comes from.
Absolutely.
I love those little currant tomatoes that you're adding there, Todd. Those
Even more fun garnishes, fun toys that I have from the garden. And so these are like little currant tomatoes, which add a little pop. You know, they're very tart and acidic. They're packed full of power and flavor. So they make a fantastic garnish to go with it as well.
Just beautiful. Thank you so much for that. It looks delicious. And one of the things that we do at the winery when you come and visit is we do have a veggies and vino pairing, and Todd is constantly pairing great vegetables from the garden, whatever's in season, with our wines. So if you're looking for some pairings like that, his recipes are on the website. And when you come visit, make sure you you book the veggie and vino pairing, because it's quite amazing. Online, I had a question about the fires. Thank you so much for asking. Everybody's safe and well, and it looks like we've got them under control here. So fortunately, we did have a few employees have to evacuate, but they're all safe and sound, and their homes are safe and sound. So we're really fortunate again, and appreciate all of our neighbors' hard work. Here's a live view of the ranch right now from looking off towards parcel 24 from the top of parcel 10. Just a beautiful day, a little bit of fog starting to come in already here at 4 o'clock. So nice live view for us. So the next wine we have tonight is our Napa Valley Estate Cabernet Sauvignon. And this mostly comes from our Dollarhide Ranch, from those steep hillside vineyards. As I mentioned, you know, we've got half of all the soil orders in the world here in Napa Valley. And at Dollarhide, we have 7 soil variations and 7 soil series and 13 variations. And that enables us to grow different varietals in different locations on the property. And so where we grow our Cabernet Sauvignon at Dollarhide is a very shaly soil. It's a higher elevation, very shallow soil, very rocky, well drained, compared to the heavier, clayer soils where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc. We also grow a little Malbec and Petit Verdot at Dollarhide. And then in our Rutherford vineyard, where the winery is located, we grow Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Petit Verdot. And it's just a really excellent location, and very different styles of Cabernet we get from the 2 locations. The Cabernet at Dollarhide is hillside, rugged, very tiny berries. And the Cabernet that we grow at Rutherford is very elegant, fine-grained tannins, really soft, sexy texture. So the combination of those wines go into this Napa Valley Estate Cabernet Sauvignon. So let's go hear back from Brooke Shank on how we make this.
Yeah, so I'm in one of our cellars that we have where we ferment red wines. So this Cabernet is exciting. Oh, sorry, Napa Green, hang on.
Yes, we do have motion sensors on all our lights, and so we have to keep moving, keep everybody on their toes.
Sorry about that. So this Cabernet does come from both properties, and it is a little bit of a blend. With the red grapes, we also pick them at night, so hand-picked at night when it's cold. We bring it to the winery, and we actually will sort down to the berry. So we have a pretty incredible piece of machinery called an optical sorter, which you've seen on your screen right now. That optical sorter will first we have a couple people sorting clusters. So if there's not good clusters, we're going to sort them out. Then the clusters will be destemmed, and the berries will land onto a belt. The belt is running pretty fast. There's a robotic eye above the belt that's taking 1,000 photos a second. And at the end of that belt, there are 100 air jets. And based on the parameters that I input into the machine, into the computer, it will decide in midair whether it's going to keep that berry or reject that berry. And the parameters that I'm using are shape, color, size. So I can have it sort out leaves, I can have it sort out stems, raisins, pink berries, green berries, and I can have it just keep, you know, perfect purple berries is what we want, or grapes. We call them berries, but they're grapes. So that optical sorter is pretty incredible for us. It allows us to be able to sort every single berry with the parameters that we want. And we have had that for the last, I guess 2012 was the first year. So, and this particular wine, the Napa Cab, it really has benefited because Dollarhide is at elevation, and we do have some steep terraces there. And sometimes with steep terraces, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the majority of the cluster is going to be ripe and beautiful and ready to pick. And then there could be maybe a couple berries inside that are pink or a little underripe. And so using this machine and being able to sort down to that level, we can sort out that underripe berry that's in that cluster. So it's pretty incredible. And the other thing is once we get those grapes sorted, we have a couple different options, or actually a lot of options. To ferment the red grapes in. So, and each one of them will create a different wine. So I could take one parcel of red grapes and I could pick it, hand pick that night, sort it that day, and then I could take that fruit and divide it into a few different options in the cellar to ferment. We have these concrete tanks behind us. We have 4 of those. They hold about 3 tons, so they're quite small. And that's going to create a different wine than if I ferment in the oak tank, which we also have 4 of those. Or I could choose a small stainless steel tank, which I'll just flip this right here. I think you can see we have a bank of stainless steel tanks that we could ferment in. And that's going to, those 3 options right there are going to create a completely different wine at the end of fermentation, even though the wine came from the same block and was picked on the same day and sorted in the same manner. So we end up having, because we have all these choices for fermentation, we end up having a lot more wines at the end of the day than I mean, not that we don't like, because we do like, but we're giving ourselves so many different options. So when we sit down to blend this Napa Estate Cabernet, you can see all those bottles there. I mean, we're starting with 150 plus bottles to sit down to make this blend. And the reason why we're giving ourselves all those options is because we're trying to, we want to layer our wines. We want there to be a lot of different choices and layers and complexity, and that's how we're trying to make the wine. So we make it difficult for ourselves, but we also are giving ourselves options, just like Chef Todd does in the kitchen, where he's layering with the different textures and the spices, and that's exactly what we're doing as winemakers as well, is just trying to layer and make the best blend we can.
So, Brooke, we did get a question online. You know, you talk about all those different layers, and we're not even going to go into the different types of oak barrels that you can put them in, that again is creating different lots. But we did get a question from Jeff online asking what Cabernet clones are in the wine. And we do grow quite a number of different clones of Cabernet, and we have those clones on different rootstock. Depending upon the parcel, we're matching up both the rootstock and the clone to that location. So do you want to comment on some of those different clones?
Yeah, for sure. We do have a number of different clones based on the parcel. So, I mean, even just at Rutherford alone, we have clone 4, we have clone 6, we have clone 7, clone 33. Let's see. And then when you go to Dollarhide, we have clone 47, a lot more clone 4, clone 6, clone 8, clone 15. So we have a lot of clones out there. And then just based on, you know, the older vineyards, obviously, I feel like our newer vineyards and our new developments in the last 20 years, you start learning about different clones. And then, so the newer developments have some of the newer kind of fun clones. So there's actually a lot of different clones in this Cabernet.
Yeah, it really is. And that's another factor that we keep separately. You know, we can keep the parcel separate. The parcel can be picked at 3 different times. And then you have multiple fermentation choices. There's a lot more detail that goes into making a bottle of Cabernet. Even our Dollarhide Cabernet Sauvignon, that's 100% Cabernet, has over 30 lots from our oldest parcels on the property in there. And we're tasting every single barrel. If there's 12 of that lot, we may only be putting 3 in, and we're narrowing it down by barrel every single case. So we definitely make every wine as if we're making a 20 case lot, like we're making our premier Napa Valley wines. So Brooke, just tell us a little bit about this wine before we go to have it with our dinner that Chef Todd's cooking.
Sure. So it is a blend between the 2 vineyards. This 2017 ends up being 82% Cabernet Sauvignon, and so obviously the backbone, it's getting all the blackberry and the structure and the tannin from that Cabernet. The majority of that Cabernet is coming from Dollarhide at that elevated vineyard. We have 6% Malbec. Malbec is grown at Dollarhide as well, only at Dollarhide. It likes elevation, and Malbec is a really juicy grape. It gives a little bit of acidity, a little bit of color to the blend, and adds a little bit of juiciness. And then we have 5% Petit Verdot. We grow Petit Verdot at both properties. Petit Verdot has a thick skin and a lot of tannin and a lot of color. So a little bit of Petit Verdot goes a long way in a blend, and there's 5% here. We have 4% Merlot. Merlot is only grown at Rutherford for us, and the Merlot kind of plumps up the center a little bit, gives it a little bit of cherry and just nice soft tannins, especially with that from Rutherford, getting like the little dusty tannins that we get. And 3% Cabernet Franc, which also we grow at Rutherford. We have 3 clones of Cabernet Franc we grow here, and we ferment them separately. And we will use that as a blender to add a little bit of spiciness and tannin and, a little spiciness to the blend.
Yeah, I love the little bit of mocha I always get with the Merlot that we have, and I love that the little violets that I get from the Cabernet Franc, just really pretty. Delicious wines, and absolutely fantastic with food. I think all of the wines that you and Michael and Asael make have just a great freshness and are so food friendly, with good density, but they're not heavy on the palate. They really want to be served with food or on their own, as some of us are having right now. But let's jump over to Chef Todd, because he is going to do this amazing compound butter and steak for you all. You're going to look like geniuses when you prepare this, and it's so easy. Well, he makes it look so easy. So Todd, what do you have to pair with this Cabernet Sauvignon?
Thank you. So I love to work with this Cabernet. Sometimes I feel like it's maybe one of the more versatile ones that we have. It's very approachable. It's got that fantastic balance. The smell and just the aromatics in there is incredible. So it's always a fun one to pair up with. You know, an easy one to always use as almost like a default, but it's like the perfect pairing, is some beef, some beautiful beef. So on the Costco website, I was browsing through and I thought, why not do a really nice piece of steak? You know, every time I go to my local Costco, I'm looking at what they have available. Each one's different. Sometimes they even have prime grades, which is fantastic at really incredible pricing. And then the wines, obviously, you can pick up great deals on the wines there, especially St. Supéry wines. But what I thought I would do is an interesting technique, if you haven't heard about it before. It's called reverse searing. What you're doing is kind of engineering the whole process of cooking a steak backwards. Now, there's nothing wrong with throwing a steak on a hot grill or putting it into a searing hot pan and cooking it from raw. But in this case, it's a different kind of approach where you're thinking about the doneness, the final doneness of the steak initially. What do you want to start with? Taking it up in a very low oven up to that temperature, and then finishing the opposite way by searing on the outside. So what it does is kind of creates a different texture on the inside. It helps to ensure an even degree of doneness on the inside of the steak. And it kind of takes away some of the guesswork on where is my steak and as far as the final temperature. So the recipe that I included on this has two components to it. Number one, I've got garnishes and finishing touches that go on top of that. And what I have for you is a compound butter that I love to keep on hand. Since I have the wine at my disposal lots of times here, I will work with those wines and utilize them in part of the dish. And in this particular case, part of my garnishes that I have here, I have for the actual cooking and browning in the pan, there's a garlic clove, there's some fresh thyme from my garden. Here's some cubes of cold butter, just everyday butter. I have some wonderful blue cheese. In this case, this is going to be fantastic with the Cabernet. This is Bay Blue from Point Reyes. It's right close to us, right off of the coast, and it's one of our best suppliers for a local blue cheese. Again, trying to stay as blue or local as possible and sustainable ingredients. Here's the fun compound butter that I made, and you can use this utilizing any kind of wine, but I love to use a white wine with it, but in this case, you can tell that I use some of our Cabernet. The recipe is included as a sub-recipe, and what you would do is take that wine along with some shallots from our garden. I put in some fresh herbs in there as well. There's black pepper. You could basically reduce that down and cook that wine down until it's almost like a syrup. And then if you have some softened butter, room temperature butter, you put it basically in a processor and you blend it all together until it's whipped. And that's where you get this beautiful color. What I happen to do is roll it into tubes, like in a plastic wrap, and kind of roll it up almost like a little sausage or hot dog. And then I can keep them in the refrigerator or the freezer, and they keep for a long time. And then as I need to, I can take a piece out, bring it up to room temperature, slice it, and put it over a beautiful roast or a nice piece of steak, something like that. So it's just enough to accent it. It definitely has that acidity and that richness in there from the wine, the concentration. So it really acts as a bridge when you're taking a bite of the steak to go with the wine. It creates this nice bridge ingredient there. So if you ever want to try that, you can make this red wine butter or even a white wine butter. And the ingredients or the different spices or seasonings that you add, they're endless. If you love tarragon with yours, which goes really well, sometimes you can add fresh chopped tarragon. If you like horseradish in there, you can put some fresh grated horseradish. That's a nice way to put it in there. So you can add all kinds of fun things into this, you know, some roasted garlic or something like that. So utilize that as a base recipe, and that's something you can keep in your arsenal or in your chef's palate there. So what I wanted to do is talk about the beef itself. Number one, I have some beef tenderloin, and I'll show you because mine was already in the oven. This is kind of a process that you have to think ahead a little bit on, and you have to plan for, because it does take a while for the whole process of seasoning and holding the beef so that it has time to come to room temperature. And then preset your oven to very low temperature, about 200 to 250 degrees. And you're going to put this in the oven, the beef in the oven. I happen to have a thermometer, which I'll show you. It's an oven-safe thermometer that I can judge the internal temperature doneness. And I'll show you what it looks like here.
Well, that's one of my favorite kitchen tools, Todd. I would destroy so many things if I didn't have that thermometer. It
really is kind of a saving grace. It's a great thing to have, especially when you're spending a nice chunk of money on your thick steak. You can tell that these are pretty good sized beef tenderloin. So these are nice thicker ones. I would highly recommend, if you're going to try this reverse sear method, that you use a thicker steak so that you have some forgiveness in the room there. If it's too thin, like say maybe less than 1.5 inches, I wouldn't necessarily try this reverse sear method. You might want to just cook it traditionally. If you've ever heard of, by the way, sous vide method of cooking it in a vacuum bag submerged in water, that's another style of cooking it evenly all the way through. So that's another idea of the same thing, where then you finish the steak afterwards as far as getting the beautiful crust. Now, looking at this beef itself, it's tender, it's nice and soft, it's a beef filet mignon, but the color doesn't look very attractive on the outside because it was cooked at such a low temperature. These went for close to maybe about 25 to 30 minutes at about 200 to 225 degrees in my ovens here. So depending on the thickness of your steak, the fact that I pulled mine out to room temperature for maybe about an hour ahead of time, and I've had it seasoned really well with salt and black pepper all the way around it, that's going to vary on the amount of time that it takes to go into the oven. What helps to offset that and guesswork is having a temperature gauge here where I have mine set to 120 degrees, and with this temperature probe inside there, I can close the oven door and it'll sound off a little timer to let me know that the internal temperature is 120 degrees, and so I can now pull the beef out of the oven. So that's one of the steps that you're going to have to look at to kind of plan ahead on, because obviously it does take a little bit more time. But what I wanted to do is show you the finishing process, because imagine now, this steak was cooked at a very low temperature, so the internal doneness and the warmth is basically done. And what you're going to do is use a heavy cast iron pan, or whichever pan that you have that's heavy. You could even do this on a grill, but in this case, I wanted to utilize some butter and the garlic and everything to kind of butter bath baste it at the end. So my pan is going to get very hot. The cast iron on this holds the heat very well. And what I'm going to do is basically take one of the steaks. Again, they are all seasoned. They're basically dry to the surface, to the touch on the outside, because that low temperature kind of sealed it in on the outside. So the idea would be that it's still nice and tender, fairly moist on the inside, because it cooked very slowly all the way through until about 122 degrees internally. Now, when I put this in the pan and sear the outsides and all the sides, there's very little temperature increase that will happen on the inside there, so I don't necessarily have to wait and rest and let it sit for 8 to 10 minutes while the meat is kind of relaxing and everything and the juices are distributing, because it already is almost at that point. So once my pan is hot here, what I'm going to do is utilize an oil, a neutral oil, or even clarified butter that has a higher smoke point to it. And by that I mean that it won't ignite, or it won't basically give off a bitter taste to it. So I'm going to use some neutral canola oil here just as a simple layer. So just enough to kind of coat the bottom of the pan. And now that I have that and it's hot and I see that first wisp of smoke, what I'm going to go ahead and do is put my already seasoned and perfectly up to temperature filet mignon in here. And I'm going to get it going on this bottom, on the presentation side. So this is the side that I'm going to serve up. And what this will do is encourage that whole browning, that whole tasty development. Remember, this will be fairly quick on all the outside exterior edges, and it should not cook and overcook the interior doneness of the finished steak. And so the reason why I'm starting off with neutral oil is basically just to kind of get the browning process going. I'm going to add my cubes of butter and my aromatics into there after I flip it over, so it doesn't become too dark of a whole butter. So this is a fun technique where it's basically reverse cooking, but searing it at the end. Right. And that's going to start to get some browning. Let me see if I can show you how it's looking here. Starting to get that nice brown on the edge there, but I'm going to let it go a little bit longer. Should be able to find some really nice steaks, your favorite cut of beef. And as long as you have the time and can plan ahead on this, give it a try in the oven at a low temperature and get that perfect degree of doneness that you like on the inside. Typically 125 degrees of a finished internal temperature is what we like to say is the nice medium rare. All right, so now that I've got some beautiful browning, I don't know if you can see that or not, but compared to what it was initially to how it is now, that's where that beautiful Maillard reaction, that wonderful browning and caramelization is happening. Now what I'm going to do is flip it over to get the other side, right? And now I'm going to go ahead and add my butter. And this is going to melt down. It's going to heat up the solids. I'll definitely see some nice kind of smoke and toasting going on. I'm going to add my thyme. Little crackle going on there because it's dry. And then the garlic in there as well. And so now what's happening here is the buttermilk solids are toasting. And what I'm going to do is butter baste this all over. So the toasty garlic becomes kind of nutty in flavor. The thyme also adds some nice flavors to the outside. I'm going to help sear and develop more of that nice crust on the outside by using this whole butter technique and basically just spooning it over. You can see how I'm kind of tipping the pan so I have a little bit more of a reservoir. And so now it's already searing. The smell on this is incredible. I pick up the thyme and the garlic and that brown butter smell. And it's fairly quick from here. Just a few washes over of that. And then what I want to do is take a look and see what it looks like on the other side. Again, nice even browning all the way around. If it's a really thick steak, you can also sear the sides of it. So just take it from the side and kind of roll it around in that wonderful herbaceous garlic brown butter and sear off the sides of your steak as well. All right, so at that point, I'm going to go ahead and cut the heat. I think I've got a pretty good amount of nice base right over the whole steak.
Oh, beautiful.
In and out fairly quick, remembering that it is basically all done on the inside there. So what I'd like to do then, before I plate it up or ready to serve, obviously everything else that you're going to have to serve with this would be done. So what you can do is take that cut of beef along with your vegetables or whatever else you're having. I'm going to dab off that excess oil off of there. Put my beef right on top. And then part of the fun ingredients that really top it off and make it even more of a wine pairing, I'm going to go ahead and add some of our butter into here. So I have this Point Riz blue cheese. So this is a rich blue cheese. It's kind of fudgy in texture. It's called Bay Blue. I'm going to add that on top as that kind of warms through and melts. There's something about that blue cheese culture that's in there, that mold that's in there, that goes really well with the red wine. And then on top of that, my compound butter. So a nice thick slab of that right over the top. So this is kind of a combination. You've got all that kind of richness that you have in there along with the butter and the richness. So as it hits the top heat on this, it should start to melt slowly. Internal temperature looks really good and perfect, but I thought I would have a little bit of fun with some fire and do a little roasty toasty on this to kind of help it along with the melting process.
Oh my.
See if you can see that. Obviously, this is an optional thing. If you do have a propane torch, maybe if you're making your own creme brulees or something, this is actually kind of toasting and melting the cheese and that beautiful butter, so it goes right over the top. So an optional thing, an optional touch. You don't necessarily have to do that. I happen to have a roasted tomato on here, or potato, excuse me, a cremini mushroom to go with that. And as a little extra fun, you could even torch. I'm going to torch and add a little smoke off of the thyme from our garden there. So a little wisp of that smoke coming off of the thyme to go with it. So hopefully that's a fantastic way to cook off the steak, to create a wonderful pairing with our Cabernet Sauvignon. You know, you've got that wonderful acidity, you've got the fine tannins in there, you've got beef that goes so well with it. And then by cutting in and having a nice little butter bath on there along with that cheese that goes so well, this should be a wonderful pairing.
That looks gorgeous, Todd. I think you're going to make everybody a hero this weekend with that recipe. You keep teaching me about butter baths. I've been loving the butter bath, lobster butter bath. I've done a few times. And I know Julia Child was right. Everything is better with butter. That is just
so many things are better with butter, yes.
Just beautiful. And oh my goodness, I think
yes, you can imagine
everyone's
going to melt through. That'll just kind of cut through nicely. I have some fun garnishes. This is actually some rosemary. So not only did I torch and flame the thyme, but these are little blossoms off of some of the rosemary here from our estate. So they actually add a nice little flavor punch as well as a decoration on the plate. Well, hopefully that's a delicious combination along with your glass of, or excuse me, your bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. So I hope you give that a try.
Well, that is just fantastic. Thank you so much, Todd, for sharing that with us today. You're always cooking up something amazing in the kitchen. I think everyone's going to have a fantastic holiday weekend with that. Thank you all so much for joining us. It was really a treat to have you. We do virtual tastings with Chef Todd quite regularly. We're doing the Harvest Series right now. We're going to go into fall entertaining as you start to think about what you're going to do for the holidays and who's coming over, or you're expanding your pod to just a few people at home. Why not make an extra special meal and make it a little extra special? Todd's got all the tips and recipes to do so. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Come check out the recipes online at saintsupéry.com or go to our virtual tastings. Enjoy your wines tonight and have a fantastic weekend. We hope you enjoy your Labor Day, and we wish you all good health, and thanks so much. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.